So before we can really talk about the origin of humans, we need to stop for a minute and ask a very simple question. What is it that we mean when we say human? Now you might think that's obvious, right? I mean, we're human, duh. And that's, to an extent, very true. At the same time, it's been my observation in the modern debate over the historical Adam, different people mean very different things when they talk about what it is to be human. And there's a lot of assumptions going around that I think it would be very helpful to just clarify. So let's start with what the Bible actually says. So in Genesis 1 we read, God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And then in chapter 2 it elaborates, "The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Now for centuries theologians have placed a great deal of importance on the term there, image of God. Generally speaking, there's probably two understandings of image of God that are common in evangelical circles. By far the most common is this notion that the image of God is a quality. It's something that we possess. Usually our smarts, right? Our ability to speak, our ability to have relationships, our ability to manipulate our environment, and so on. These are said to be facets of the image of God. They allow us to have dominion over creation, which animals don't have. And so the image of God then is this quality that sets us apart from the creatures around us. An alternative way of reading it would be that the image of God is not something that we possess at all. In fact, when we look at the term image of God there, what we find is it's the same term used in the Old Testament for graven images, right? So idols. So what is an idol? Well, an idol is a representation. It's a physical manifestation of some ruler or some god or some authority figure. An idol basically sits in a place and says, "This place is mine. I have dominion in this area." And in that sense, that's very helpful because that seems a lot like what we see here in the description of the image of God. So for some, then, the image of God is actually a position that we hold. It is a thing that we do, not necessarily a quality that we possess. Now, there's lots of other, shades of meaning there that we could emphasize, and plenty of theologians would want to emphasize that, and some that are watching this are probably thinking, but there's these other things, and yes, that's true. My point is, when we think about the image of God, what do we do when we have the remains of people, or the remains of creatures from the fossil record? So for example, here we've got a bunch of fossils. What am I supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to do with this? These creatures here are, well, they're remarkably different from what we find in the present. They're not like us now. So should we understand these creatures as human? Should we use ourselves to define what is human from the fossil record, or from other scientific evidences, footprints or cave art or ancient DNA? And the assumption that has been pervasive throughout the historical Adam discussion is that, yeah, we, Homo sapiens sapiens, here in the modern world, we are what is human. And if you are not exactly what we are, then you are not human, right? So when we look into the idea about many different atoms that we see in population genetics, this notion that somehow there's way too many people at the origin of modern humanity to make sense of, because there couldn't be a single couple that we all descended from. There's too many genes, too much diversity. It couldn't have come from a single ancestral pair. But all of those studies are looking at the origin of Homo sapiens, looking at us. But what if we're not the only people on the planet? We have to look broader than that. We have to look bigger than that. We have to look at some of these creatures and ask those kinds of questions. Are these creatures human? And so, as we talk about and as we look at the origin of humans, what I want you to think about and what I want you to remember is that human isn't necessarily only what I am. Human is, for me, the physical descendants of Adam and Eve, regardless of what they look like or how they behaved. So that would include all the people alive today, from primitive tribesmen to the most advanced businessman living in Manhattan. However you want to measure cultural advancement. Those are all human. And I have to admit that maybe humans embrace an even bigger diversity of form than what we find today. And with that in mind, with that sort of careful approach to what is human, I think we can make a lot more sense of the fossil record and a lot more sense of the genetic evidence than if we just assume that we modern humans are the only ones that are human.